I never thought a family dinner could end with a slap across my face. One moment, I was greeting my daughter-in-law politely. The next, she was screaming in my living room, demanding my house keys. My heart was pounding. My son stood frozen, unable to defend either of us. I felt shock, humiliation, and an anger so intense it made my hands tremble. How could she treat me and her family with such disrespect? I knew then that this was more than a moment of reject, was a test, and I was about to show her that crossing me came with a price she would never forget. I am Margaret, 52 years old, and I have always taken pride in my home. It is not just a house. It is a sanctuary I built with my own hands, a place filled with warmth, laughter, and memories that span decades. Every corner of my home carries a story, family photos on the walls, the smell of fresh flowers in the living room, the soft hum of music that drifts from the kitchen. My son Daniel is 28 years old, and he has always been my world. From the moment he was born, I dedicated myself to nurturing him, guiding him, and protecting him. Our bond is strong, and I believed it would withstand anything, even the challenges that come with new family members. When Daniel married Julia, I wanted to welcome her with open arms. Julia is beautiful and striking, with a charisma that draws attention wherever she goes. At first, I tried to see the best in her. I reminded myself that she was the woman my son chose, and I needed to respect his choice. I told myself patience would work, that kindness could smooth the rough edges. But Julia is not someone who can be tamed by politeness or respect. Her behavior was subtle at first. She would make little remarks about my cooking, laughing when a dish was slightly overcooked or suggesting I should modernize my decor. I smiled and nodded, pretending to be unaffected. I told myself these were minor annoyances, nothing that should ruin my relationship with my son. The real tension began to surface the night of our first dinner together after the wedding. I had spent hours preparing the meal. I cooked his favorite dishes, set the table with the finest china, and lit candles to create a warm, inviting atmosphere. I wanted it to be perfect tonight to celebrate family, to reconnect and share stories. When Julia arrived, her presence immediately shifted the energy in the house. She stepped in wearing a smug expression, scanning every corner as if she owned the place. She barely acknowledged my greeting, and her eyes were sharp, calculating. My heart sank, but I forced a smile, welcoming her politely. Dinner began, and I tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her day, her work, her plans. Julia interrupted constantly, her voice sharp and dismissive. "Kay?" She made small jabs at my age, my habits, my cooking. I felt the sting of each word, but I held my composure, reminding myself that confrontation would only escalate matters. Then the moment came that I will never forget. Julia demanded my house keys. She demanded them as if they were her right, as if the home I had lived in for decades was now hers to claim. When I refused, she slapped me. Hard, the sound of her hand against my cheek reverberated through the living room. My skin burned, my mind spun, and my heart pounded with shock and disbelief. Daniel froze, unable to respond. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the helplessness, the panic. I felt a mix of humiliation, rage, and disbelief. How could someone behave this way in my home? To me? Her family? How could my own son stand by silently while this happened? As Julia stormed out, still demanding obedience, I sat in the aftermath, my cheeks stinging, my body trembling. My home felt violated. I felt powerless, yet beneath that powerlessness, a fire was igniting. This was not over. No one slaps me, no one demands what is mine, and no one disrespects me without consequences. That night, alone in my living room, I made a promise to myself. I would reclaim my dignity, my home, and my authority, and Julia would learn that some lines, once crossed, can never go unpunished. If you have ever been disrespected or underestimated, hit that like button and subscribe now. This story will show you the sweetest form of justice, the kind that leaves the guilty trembling and the innocent finally feeling vindicated. The weeks after that slap were unbearable. Julia did not stop. In fact, her behavior escalated in ways I could not have imagined. Every visit became a test of patience. Every phone call a trial of endurance. She would call me under the pretense of asking for advice, only to twist my words and make me feel foolish. She would ask about recipes or household tips and then criticize the way I spoke, the way I held my voice, or even the way I smiled. Each interaction left a knot of frustration tightening in my chest. I remember one evening vividly. It was late, the sky dark and heavy with clouds, and rain tapped against my windows. Julia arrived unexpectedly, holding a shopping bag filled with groceries as if she were doing me a favor. The first thing she did was scan the room with that self-satisfied smirk. My heart sank. I forced a smile, but my body tensed. She stepped inside uninvited, setting her bags on my counter without a word. Her hands knocked over my carefully arranged utensils, and she made a point of laughing at my efforts to correct her. "These counters are cluttered," she said, her voice sharp and mocking. "Do you even know how to organize a kitchen properly?" I felt heat rise in my chest. My hands wanted to tremble, but I kept them steady. I told myself to remain calm, but the words stuck in my throat. Each sentence she spoke was a needle, pricking at my patience. My eyes met Daniel's across the room. He tried to intervene, to explain, but she cut him off effortlessly, her voice loud and dominant, leaving him powerless and frustrated. Her attacks were not always verbal. She would linger in my home longer than necessary, rearranging furniture or placing her belongings in spaces she had no right to touch. Every movement was deliberate, calculated. It was a constant reminder that she believed she had power over me, over my home, over my life. Each intrusion made me feel smaller, insignificant, as if my decades of effort and love were meaningless. I tried to reason with her. I tried to smile, to offer kindness, to show patience. Nothing worked. Every boundary I set was ignored. Every attempt at dialogue twisted into another opportunity for her to assert dominance. Her arrogance was infuriating. She laughed at my caution, mocked my diplomacy, and seemed to take pleasure in my discomfort. I began to feel something new, a dangerous mix of anger and determination. The helplessness I had felt during that first slap was gone. It had been replaced by something sharper, something burning. I realized she would not stop on her own. She would not apologize. She would not respect me unless I forced her to understand that disrespect has consequences. That night, lying awake while the rain pattered against the window, I felt my resolve solidify. I could feel the tension in my body, the heartbeat quickening with a mixture of fear and anticipation. I knew what I needed to do. I needed to plan, to observe, and to prepare. She had underestimated me. She had believed that power could be taken without consequence. That belief would be her undoing. The night I decided I could no longer tolerate Julia, I sat alone in my living room, the house silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. The sting of her slap still lingered in my mind, and I could feel the warmth of humiliation crawl up my neck. My hand unconsciously went to my cheek, as if touching it could erase the memory. It could not. The memory burned like fire, and for the first time I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my anger. I realized that this was not simply about a slap or even about a set of keys. This was about respect, about dignity, about my life being intruded upon by someone who believed they could manipulate and intimidate me. Julia had made a grave mistake by underestimating me. I could see it clearly now. Her arrogance, her constant need to control, her smug confidence, these were not signs of strength. They were vulnerabilities. She had revealed herself in the most perfect way. I rose from the couch, pacing the length of the room. The floorboards creaked under my feet, a steady rhythm that mirrored my heartbeat. I thought about every interaction, every slight, every subtle attempt to belittle me. I remembered her laughter as she tossed my utensils aside. I remembered her eyes, sharp and triumphant, as if she had already won. The fury inside me grew, but it was no longer blind rage. It was focused, precise, and calculating. I began to consider my options. I needed a plan, A way to reclaim my house, my dignity, and my authority. It had to be smart. It had to be undeniable. Every detail mattered. The timing, the environment, the psychology of the moment. I imagined her expression when she realized that the power she thought she had would slip through her fingers. I could almost hear her gasp, almost feel the tension radiate from her body as she understood she had misjudged me completely. I remembered a saying my mother once told me, "Do not strike out of anger, strike out of purpose." That advice resonated now more than ever. This was not a matter of revenge for the sake of revenge. This was about justice, fairness, and reclaiming control. I needed to be patient, meticulous, and strategic. One misstep could ruin everything. But one perfect execution could restore everything she had tried to take from me. I spent the night thinking, planning, imagining scenarios in vivid detail. I noted her habits, her weaknesses, her overconfidence. I pictured how she would react under stress, how easily she could be flustered when her sense of control was stripped away. Each thought sharpened my resolve. Each imagined reaction built my confidence. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I was certain of one thing. I was ready. I would act, and I would act decisively. No longer would I be passive. No longer would I allow intimidation to dictate my life. Julia had crossed a line that could never be ignored. She had underestimated me, and that mistake would be her undoing. I could feel the tension in my shoulders release slightly as determination replaced fear. The moment of decisive resolve had arrived. I was ready to reclaim what was mine, and nothing would stand in my way. I knew revenge did not have to be loud or violent to be powerful. It had to be precise. It had to be undeniable. And most of all, it had to expose Julia for exactly who she was. I began by observing her, quietly and carefully, like someone studying a storm before it hit. I watched how she spoke to people, how her voice changed when she believed she was in control, how her posture straightened when she felt superior. She thrived on dominance. She needed to feel powerful. That was her weakness. My plan formed slowly, like a shadow stretching across a wall. I would not confront her directly. I would let her walk into her own consequences. I started by reinforcing my boundaries in subtle ways. I changed the locks on my house, not out of fear, but out of principle. This was my home, my sanctuary. No one would enter it without my permission again. Holding the new keys in my hand felt symbolic, like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been taken. Then I set the stage. I invited Daniel and Julia over for dinner again. The invitation was calm, polite, almost warm. I could imagine Julia reading the message with that smug smile, thinking she had already won, thinking I was backing down. That thought alone gave me strength. Let her believe she had power. It would make the moment of truth even more devastating. The day of the dinner, I prepared my home with intention. Everything was immaculate. The table was set carefully. The lighting was soft but deliberate. I wanted the atmosphere to feel calm, controlled, almost peaceful. It was the kind of calm that comes before a storm. My heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with anticipation. I felt grounded, focused, ready. When they arrived, Julia walked in first, just as I expected. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for signs of weakness. She did not find any. For a brief moment, I saw confusion flicker across her face, but she masked it quickly with arrogance. Dinner began normally, too normally. That was the dangerous part. Julia spoke confidently, making small comments meant to assert dominance. I responded politely, firmly, without emotion. Each calm reply unsettled her. I could see it in her posture. Control was slipping, and she did not understand why. Then, at the right moment, I placed a small envelope on the table. Julia noticed it immediately. Her eyes narrowed. Her curiosity betrayed her composure. "What is that?" she asked. I looked at her calmly. "It is something you need to see." She opened it slowly. Inside were copies of messages she had sent me. recordings of her verbal abuse, and documentation of her attempts to manipulate my home and my authority. Everything I had quietly collected, carefully preserved, and legally documented. Nothing illegal, nothing exaggerated, only truth. Her face drained of color. Daniel leaned forward, confused. "What is this?" I spoke evenly. "It is proof. Proof that I have been disrespected, manipulated, and threatened in my own home. And it stops tonight." The room felt frozen. Julia opened her mouth, but no words came out. The confidence she once radiated collapsed into panic. Her power was gone, exposed, stripped away by her own actions. I changed the locks. I continued. "You will not demand keys again. You will not raise your voice to me again. You will not treat me as if I am disposable again." Silence followed. Heavy, final. Julia had built her identity on control. In that moment, she had none. And she knew it. The moment of truth arrived, like a storm breaking over a calm sea. Julia stood frozen, the envelope of her own words and deeds in her trembling hands. Her eyes darted between me and Daniel, searching for a lifeline, a way to reclaim control. But there was none. The room felt impossibly small, the air thick with tension, like the pause before a verdict is read in a courtroom. I leaned back slightly, maintaining calm. My heartbeat was steady, controlled, but beneath it simmered a torrent of vindication. For weeks I had imagined this moment, rehearsed it in my mind, and now it unfolded perfectly. I watched Julia swallow hard, her confident mask shattered. Every sarcastic smirk, every laugh she had thrown my way, every condescending remark she had made, it all came rushing back to her, reflected in the evidence she could not deny. She tried to speak. Her words came out in a stammer, a half-formed plea for mercy. "Margaret, this is ridiculous." I raised a hand. No explanations, no excuses. "Every action you have taken, every insult, every intrusion, you did this to yourself." Her lips trembled. I could see the flush of anger and embarrassment spreading across her face. The arrogance that had once defined her was gone, replaced by fear and disbelief. It was intoxicating, not because I wished her harm, but because justice, finally, had been served. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, and I felt a pang of sympathy for him, but also pride. He had always been caught in the middle, powerless to stop her. Now he could see clearly what I had endured. I watched his expression change, relief and understanding washing over him. He finally understood the weight of what had happened, the humiliation I had endured, and the strength it had taken to stand my ground. Julia's hands shook as she set the envelope down. She looked around the room as if searching for allies, but the house itself seemed to side with me. Every photograph, every memory, every corner I had painstakingly arranged spoke of my life, my home, and my authority. It was a silent courtroom, and she was standing guilty before it. "You will respect my home," I said slowly, deliberately, letting each word land like a hammer. "You will respect me. And you will not test me again. It ends tonight." Her voice faltered. She swallowed, tears threatening to spill, and for a fleeting moment I saw the vulnerability beneath her veneer. She had tried to dominate me, to intimidate me, to erase my authority. But she failed, completely, and the satisfaction was almost overwhelming. I felt a wave of release wash over me, a tension I did not know I had carried until that very second. My chest loosened, my hands unclenched, and a small, victorious smile crossed my face. The humiliation she had inflicted on me for weeks and that one unforgettable slap was now reversed. Power had shifted, respect had been reclaimed, and the house, my sanctuary, was finally mine again. Julia looked at me one last time, her face a mixture of anger, fear, and shame. Then she turned and left, her departure quiet, hurried, and defeated. The door closed behind her with a definitive click. I sank into the nearest chair, exhausted but triumphant. Every nerve in my body relaxed. I had endured. I had stood my ground. I had won. And for the first time in weeks, I felt completely, undeniably free. The house was quiet after Julia left. The air felt lighter, the walls no longer heavy with tension. I walked slowly through each room, my fingers brushing over surfaces that I had spent decades arranging, creating, and protecting. The familiar scent of polished wood and fresh flowers seemed sweeter, more profound than ever. I realized in that moment that victory was not just about proving Julia wrong. It was about reclaiming myself, my authority, and my peace. I sat by the window watching the sun dip low in the sky, painting the room with golden light. I reflected on the weeks of torment, the frustration, the humiliation, and the anger that had simmered within me. Each of those emotions had been heavy, almost unbearable, but they had taught me something invaluable. I had learned that patience and observation could be more powerful than immediate retaliation. I had learned that strategic action guided by purpose could achieve justice far more satisfying than rash confrontation. In the end, Julia's arrogance had been her undoing. She had believed that intimidation could bend me, that her audacity would allow her to claim authority that was never hers. Watching her crumble, seeing the fear and disbelief in her eyes, brought a sense of justice that words cannot fully capture. It was not cruelty, it was balance restored. And in that balance, I found relief, satisfaction, and validation. I thought about Daniel as well. I realized that part of this experience was also about teaching him something he had not fully understood, that respect is earned. Boundaries are essential, and strength is not always loud or forceful. He witnessed my composure, my strategy, and my ability to reclaim control without losing dignity. I hoped he understood that standing firm in the face of disrespect is not only necessary, but also empowering. Sitting there watching the soft glow of evening light fill the room, I felt a shift within myself. The anger that had once burned so fiercely had cooled, replaced by clarity and pride. I was no longer reacting to her provocations. I had moved beyond them. The slap, the demands, the manipulation, they no longer held power over me. I had endured, I had planned, and I had emerged stronger and unshaken. I realized that this story, my story, was not just about revenge. It was about boundaries, self-respect, and reclaiming what is rightfully yours. It was about understanding that sometimes the most powerful response is patience, strategy, and timing. And most importantly, it was about learning that no one has the right to diminish your worth. Not for a moment, not ever. As I finally rested, the house calm around me, I understood that this chapter had closed. Julia had learned her lesson. I had regained my life, and I was free, fully, undeniably free. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and share your most satisfying revenge story in the comments below. Subscribe now for more gripping tales of justice, resilience, and empowerment. You never know when the next story will inspire your own moment of triumph.